Hi, what's up, Fate family? Jarvis Guy and the Void Jarvis YT here, and welcome back to another Diecast review. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Hot Wheels 1982 Cadillac Seville from the 2023 Hot Wheels the 80s line of cars. I wonder what kind of cars you might find in that collection. Now, first off, I want to give you guys a bit of a history lesson about the Cadillac Seville, because to me, I think that this car does have a modern parallel, in spite of the fact that they haven't produced it in I think 19 or 20 years. Now, the Cadillac Seville was made in a very different era of Cadillac's history. Now, people were still buying them because black people were, and anything that we do was considered cool. But the 80s was also a great time for full-size vehicles, sedans, and especially like fastback pseudo crossover vehicles like this. Honestly, the 80s version of the Seville is pretty similar to the kinds of modern sedans that you see these car manufacturers produce today. Again, you have the fastback design, and it's a Cadillac, so there's obviously going to be a very luxury feel. And so the Seville was pretty successful up until the end of its life, where it was superseded by the Cadillac CTS, which actually I have a giant poster of over here. If I can pan the camera to that real quick. If it'll work with me. Yeah, there you can see. I do have the poster over here. You can't actually see the car. Well, you can see a little bit of it. But that's one of the newer CTSs, man. The CTS, it will always and forever be one of the best looking cars that I've ever seen. Honestly, one of the coolest. When it comes down to it, it's a very timeless design. But when it came out, the CTS, it just looked futuristic. And that was back at the time when Cadillac was trying to reinvent themselves, which was much needed if they were going to survive through the bankruptcy and the government slaughter of multiple GM brands. But that is a story for a different time. So really, I just want to start this video off with a history of the Seville, which was, I guess, the CTS of his time. And I guess near the end of his life, it was the Chrysler 300 of the Cadillac lineup. The Chrysler 300, you go into the hood and you see a whole bunch of those.
Well, you're trying to act like a gangster in your Chrysler 300. Boom!
People probably paying like $400 car notes on the cars that they obviously can't afford, but they think it makes them look cool because the 300 kind of looks like a Bentley and a Rolls Royce. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the 80s style Seville, and overall, this is a really great cast. Hot Wheels did an excellent job with this. I've kind of noticed that in some of their newer models, when they forgo painting the headlights, which always sort of peeves me off, they've started adding more detail to it. They've gotten a lot better with suggesting something being there, and the way they shaped the front of the vehicle and the headlights in particular, you can see the reflections in certain parts of the front. You see it on the bumper and where the headlights are suggested to be, but you don't see it in the grill. You don't see it as much in the grill, which is really, really cool to me. That's a really creative design decision. They did bother to paint the backlights, but I think they kind of had to, probably because of a contractual obligation. GM told them, if we're going to give you the rights to manufacture an 80s style car, you got to pay it a little bit of respect. Maybe that was the conversation. I don't know. It should have been. But either way, they went ahead and bothered to paint the backlights red. Very cool. You have the Hot Wheels logo instead of a license plate. Very cool. I mean, they had to put their branding somewhere, didn't they? You can't confuse this with a Matchbox. You don't want people mistaking this for a well-done die-cast car. No, I'm just playing. And then, as you can see right here, you have a suggestion of wood paneling, and they did a pretty decent job. I mean, it's tough to do accurate-looking wood paneling on die-cast cars. And honestly, on some real cars, since for one, I don't think it's legal anymore, which is why with cars like the PT Cruiser, which had faux wood paneling, because you can't actually put wood on these cars anymore, because if it catches on fire, then the car basically just turns into an old-fashioned hearse. But the brown paint they used here, it does a decent enough job, and I do think the brown paint is pretty well accentuated by the silver line that's going through, which I guess represents a trim, which you would see on a lot of the wood-paneled vehicles of days past. And this is all under the assumption that the Cadillac Seville had wood paneling. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know. But either way, man, this is a really faithful recreation. There's just a lot of cool stuff about this car. But I think what I like most is the 80s aesthetic, because personally, in my personal opinion, better get a bit philosophical here, the 2020s is the new version of the 80s. I mean, just come on, think about it. There's a whole bunch of turmoil in the world. People are afraid of this, the current thing or whatever. And, we're basically in a new Cold War. So it's always just interesting to see the allusions that the 2020s has to the 80s. I like to call the 2020s the 80s, but with less AIDS. So, you know, that may be a bit crass, but it's true because we've gotten a lot better about having unprotected sex. Although you're watching this video and I'm sitting here, so clearly we're not doing that good of a job with it. Either way, man, in terms of recommendations, this is an absolute recommend. I actually bought this car at an unconventional place. Usually I get my Diecast cars from Walmart. I bought this at a local dollar store, and I was very surprised that they had it in stock, man. I was just trying to get some candy from the candy aisle, which, funnily enough, was right across from the Hot Wheels. So I'm sure there have been quite a few tantrums in that aisle. But yeah, man, I was not expecting to find, honestly, a licensed cast in the dollar store, and really one of this quality. This is absolutely fantastic. Mattel did an excellent job with this, and this is an absolute recommend for me. You're probably gonna have an easy time finding this, depending on how well the Hot Wheels, the 80s line of cars sold. I'm not entirely sure which cars were in that line, but if all of them looked as good as the Seville, then hopefully it sold really well, and hopefully Hot Wheels continues to do more 80s themed content to really solidify the 2020s as the reboot of the 80s. Oh God, I cringe just thinking of that. Either way, man, that'll wrap up my review of the Hot Wheels 1982 Cadillac Seville from the 2023 Hot Wheels the 80s line of cars. I've been your host, Jarvis Gotten. Thank you all for watching. Stay tuned for more Diecast content. Have a good night. Take care of yourselves. Go with God. And as always, giggity, 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 goo. Stick around.